The polished mahogany of the conference table felt as cold as the silence in the room. It was a vast, unforgiving expanse of wood that separated Liam from the two people who had once constituted his entire world, his wife Clara and her lawyer. Now they were adversaries in a bloodless war, and this was the final signing of the armistice. A surrender, really. His surrender. Across the table, Clara sat with a posture of perfect, practiced victory. Her spine was straight, her chin was tilted just so, a subtle angle of triumph. Beside her, her new man, Julian, had insisted on attending. He wasn't a legal party to the proceedings, but his presence was a non-negotiable part of Clara's victory lap. He was a human trophy, a symbol of her upgrade. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, a smug, proprietary arm draped over the back of Clara's, his expensive watch catching the sterile light of the boardroom. He looked like a man who had never known a day of doubt in his life. So to summarize, Clara's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Brenda, said, her voice devoid of any emotion save for billable impatience. Mrs. Vance, Clara, will retain the marital home, the downtown condominium valued at $1.2 million, along with its contents. She will also retain the portfolio of joint investments, the Mercedes, and the art collection. Each word was a hammer blow, dismantling the life Liam had painstakingly helped build. He had designed the custom shelving for the art. He had negotiated the price on the condo, using his architectural knowledge to spot a structural issue that saved them $100,000. He had stayed up late for weeks, researching the stocks that now formed the bulk of that joint portfolio. And Mr. Thorne, Brenda continued, barely glancing at him, will retain his personal effects, the 2018 sedan, and the plot of undeveloped land in West Texas. She said the last words with a faint, almost imperceptible curl of her lip. The plot of undeveloped land. It sounded like a disease. Julian let out a low, condescending chuckle. The patch of dirt, he stage whispered to Clara, loud enough for the entire room to hear. Don't forget the rattlesnakes and scorpions, darling. He gets those too. Clara shot him a look that was meant to be a reprimand, but was really a shared joke. A little smile played on her lips. Be nice, Julian. Liam didn't react. He had learned over the past 6 months that his stillness was his only shield. Any flicker of anger, any hint of pain, was a currency they eagerly traded. He kept his gaze fixed on the sheaf of papers in front of him, his hands resting in his lap. Inside his right palm, his fingers traced the worn crease of a folded piece of paper he'd brought with him, the original deed to that land. A symbolic object, a reminder of where this all began and where it would end. The land was a bequest to my client from his grandfather. Liam's own lawyer, a weary but decent public defender, had argued weeks ago. It holds sentimental value. And a monetary value of approximately $5,000, according to the county assessor, Brenda had retorted, her voice like ice. Hardly a significant asset to contest. We're being more than generous by letting him keep it free and clear. Generous, that was the word they used. They were taking a life's worth of shared assets and leaving him with a car and a memory, and they called it generosity. Liam looked up, his gaze finally meeting Clara's. For a fleeting second, he saw not the victor, but the woman he had once loved. The woman who had laughed at his silly jokes and held his hand during scary movies. The memory was a ghost, a flicker in the harsh fluorescent lighting, and then it was gone, replaced by the cool, appraising stare of a stranger. Is there a problem, Liam? She asked, her voice soft but with an edge of steel. It was the voice she used when she was about to deliver the final, killing blow. We've been over this. It's what we agreed to. The condo is an asset that appreciates. It's liquid. That thing your grandfather left you is a liability. You'd have to pay taxes on it. I'm saving you the trouble, really. He thought they were done. He thought the humiliation was complete. But Julian, ever the showman, had one last flourish. He slid a sleek, silver pen across the vast table. It spun, glittering, before coming to a stop directly in front of Liam. "Here," Julian said, his voice dripping with magnanimity. "Use mine. A signing of this magnitude deserves a proper instrument." He winked at Clara. The pen was a Mont Blanc, a casual display of wealth meant to underscore everything Liam was losing, everything Julian now possessed, including his wife. Liam looked at the pen. He looked at Julian's smug face. He looked at Clara's impatient expression. He thought about the geological survey tucked away in his briefcase. He thought about the frantic, excited voice of the oil executive on the phone just 2 days prior. He thought about the number, a number so large, so life-altering, that it felt like a dream. $34 million. They thought this was his end, his defeat. They didn't know it was his beginning. And within 6 months, their entire world, built on a foundation of arrogance and dismissiveness, would come crashing down around them. If you're enjoying this story and the feeling of delicious anticipation, do me a quick favor and tap that like button. It really helps the story reach more people who, like us, appreciate it when patience and integrity get their day in the sun. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to it, because the quiet before the storm is officially over. The small, sparsely furnished apartment hummed with the lonely sound of the refrigerator. It was a stark contrast to the echoing grandeur of the condo he and Clara had shared, a space he had meticulously helped design. There, the silence had been a choice, a feature of the minimalist aesthetic. Here, it was a constant, unwelcome companion. It had been 2 weeks since the signing, 2 weeks since he had walked out of that lawyer's office, the weight of his old life lifted, and the impossible weight of his new secret settled upon his shoulders. He stood by the window, looking down at the anonymous city street. He held a simple, heavy mug filled with black coffee. It was a far cry from the delicate porcelain cups Clara had insisted upon, the ones that were now part of her art collection. He remembered a dinner party, about a year before everything fell apart. It was one of the many turning points he could now identify with painful clarity. They were hosting Clara's parents, Richard and Eleanor Vance, and a few of their equally wealthy, equally unimpressed friends. Liam had just landed a significant project at his architectural firm, a chance to design a community arts center. He was proud of it. It was a project with soul, a space for people, not just for profit. "It's a lovely little project, Liam," Eleanor had said, her tone the verbal equivalent of a pat on the head. She took a delicate sip of her wine. "Very civic-minded." Richard, a man who measured worth in quarterly earnings and market share, was less diplomatic. "Civic-minded doesn't pay for a summer in the Hamptons, does it?" he'd boomed, eliciting polite, knowing chuckles from the other guests. "Clara tells me you turned down that proposal from Sterling Developments, the skyscraper downtown. Now that's a legacy project." The Sterling project had no vision, Liam tried to explain, his voice calm. "It was a glass box with no connection to the city's character. The Arts Center will serve thousands of people. It will create a community hub." Julian, who was just a friend of the family back then, but whose intentions were already circling Clara like a shark, had laughed. "Hubs are for wheels, Liam. People with real ambition build rockets. You're building a very nice, very respectable bicycle." The table erupted in laughter. It wasn't cruel, not overtly. It was the casual, dismissive laughter of people who could not fathom a world where value wasn't measured in dollars, in square footage. Liam looked to Clara for support, for a shared glance, a subtle defense. He found none. She was smiling, a tight, social smile. "Oh, leave him be," she'd said, a touch of theatrical exasperation in her voice. "He's an artist. He's sensitive about his work." She had not defended him. She had classified him. She had put him in a box labeled harmless, eccentric, and in doing so, had sided completely with them. The rest of the evening was a blur of similar small humiliations. They talked about yachts, about tax shelters, about their children's Ivy League admissions. A world so far removed from the quiet integrity of Liam's work that he felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe. Later that night, as they were cleaning up, he had tried to talk to her about it. "Did you hear them, Clara? Did you hear the way they talked about my work, about me?" She was busy stacking plates, her movements sharp and efficient. "Oh, Liam, don't be so dramatic. That's just how they are. It's how people who are successful talk. You should try to learn from them, not get your feelings hurt." "Learn from them?" he asked, incredulous. "Learn to be condescending and materialistic?" She stopped and turned to face him, her eyes flashing with an anger that surprised him. "Yes, learn from them. Learn how to get ahead. Do you think I enjoy being the wife of the civic-minded architect while all my friends are married to bankers and CEOs? Do you know how it feels to have my father ask me if you're ever going to make a real name for yourself?" The words hung in the air between them, uglier and more solid than any wall he could ever design. It wasn't about his happiness or their shared life. It was about her reflection in the eyes of her peers. He was a component of her image, and he was underperforming. Now, standing in his quiet apartment, the memory felt less like a sting and more like a diagnosis. The sickness had been in their marriage for a long time. The divorce was not the cause of death. It was merely the signing of the certificate. He took a sip of his coffee. It was bitter, strong, and uncomplicated. He set the mug down and walked over to a simple wooden desk. On it lay the deed to the land in West Texas, and next to it, a thick, bound report with the words Geological Survey and Mineral Rights Assessment on the cover. His grandfather, a man of few words and deep wisdom, had given him the deed on his 18th birthday. "Most people look at this and see dust, Liam," he'd said, his voice raspy. "They see what's on the surface. Don't ever be one of them. The earth holds its secrets deep. You just have to be patient enough to listen." For years, it was just a piece of paper, a sentimental link to a beloved family member. But when the divorce proceedings began, and Clara's lawyers began dissecting their assets with surgical precision, Liam had remembered his grandfather's words. On a whim, driven by a flicker of intuition, he used the last of his personal savings to commission a full geological survey. Not the cheap, surface-level assessment the county used for tax purposes, but a deep, comprehensive analysis. It was a long shot, a Hail Mary pass in a game he was already losing. He told no one. It was his secret, a quiet act of defiance in a world that had become loud with Clara's demands. The results had come in the day after he signed the final divorce papers. He had sat in this very chair, reading the technical jargon, the seismic data, the core sample results, until he got to the executive summary. The language was dry, but the implications were explosive. The survey had confirmed the presence of a significant portion of the Wolfcamp Shale Formation directly beneath his worthless patch of dirt. It was one of the richest oil and gas deposits in the world. The report estimated the recoverable reserves, and at the very end, it gave a conservative market valuation, $34 million. Liam closed his eyes, the number echoing in the quiet apartment. It wasn't the money itself that thrilled him, though the freedom it represented was staggering. It was the irony. It was the beautiful, crushing, poetic justice of it all. They had taken everything that glittered on the surface and left him with the one thing that had real, hidden depth. They had dismissed him as a man who built with bricks and mortar, never realizing he was sitting on a foundation that could swallow their entire world whole. He had been patient. He had listened. And the earth had finally told him its secret. A month after the divorce was finalized, Liam drove out to the land. The city and its ghosts felt miles away, the hum of the refrigerator replaced by the vast, open silence of the Texas plains. He parked his sedan, his retained 2018 sedan, on the dusty shoulder of the county road and got out. The air was dry and hot, smelling of dust and sun-baked creosote. The land stretched out before him, a flat, unremarkable expanse of pale earth, scrub brush, and hardy mesquite trees. To the untrained eye, it was exactly as Julian had described it, a patch of dirt, worthless. But Liam's eyes were trained now. He wasn't just an architect of buildings anymore. He was becoming an architect of his own future. He saw the subtle undulations of the ground, understood the geological story they told. He saw the survey markers, nearly invisible flags his geological team had left behind, as signposts to a hidden kingdom. He felt a profound connection to this place, a sense of ownership that went far beyond any legal document. He walked for a while, the crunch of his boots on the dry soil the only sound. He held no deed, no report. He didn't need them here. This was a conversation between him, the land, and the memory of his grandfather. He felt a peace settle over him that the gleaming condo had never provided. This was real. This was solid ground. A plume of dust in the distance caught his eye. A vehicle was approaching, moving fast. It was a sleek, black SUV, the kind that looked ridiculously out of place on a rustic county road. It slowed as it neared him, the tinted windows humming down. It was Clara and Julian. Liam felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach, but he forced himself to breathe, to remain still. He would not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. "Well, well, well," Julian called out from the driver's seat, a pair of designer sunglasses perched on his head. "Look, darling, the gentleman farmer, surveying his vast estates." Clara leaned across him, her face a perfect mask of feigned concern. "Liam, what are you doing out here in the middle of nowhere? Did your car break down?" The implication was clear. The only conceivable reason for him to be here was misfortune. "I'm just visiting," Liam said, his voice even. "Enjoying the scenery." Julian laughed, a sharp barking sound. "The scenery? What, did you get tired of looking at all the different shades of brown? I hope you brought water. You look like you're about to bake." "I'm fine, Julian. Thank you for your concern," Liam said, the politeness a weapon they couldn't quite decipher. Clara's gaze swept over the barren landscape, then back to Liam. There was pity in her eyes, but it was a cruel, self-satisfying pity. The pity of a winner looking down at the loser. "Honestly, Liam, I know this place has sentimental value, but you have to be realistic. You should sell it. Even if you only get a few thousand for it, it's better than holding on to this." She gestured vaguely at the horizon, at the $34 million she couldn't see. "I'm considering my options," Liam said, the understatement of the century. "There are no options out here," Julian cut in, his patience for the charade wearing thin. "It's a tax write-off at best. Listen, we were just on our way to the city for a celebratory lunch. A friend of mine just closed a huge deal, and we're meeting him at Le Cirque. You remember Le Cirque, right, Liam?" Liam remembered. He had taken Clara there for their 5th anniversary. He had saved for months to afford it. "We've got to run," Clara said, pulling back into the car. The window started to hum its way up. "Do be careful out here, Liam. Try not to get heat stroke. Or, too attached to a lost cause." The window sealed them in their air-conditioned world. Julian gave a mock salute, gunned the engine, and the SUV sped off, leaving Liam standing in a cloud of dust and exhaust fumes. He stood perfectly still until the dust settled and the sound of their engine faded into the vast silence. A lost cause. He looked down at the earth beneath his feet. He could almost feel the deep, powerful hum of the oil reserves below, a sleeping giant. They saw dust. They saw a lost cause. They saw a man to be pitied. He smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. It was the first one in a long time. They had just driven over a fortune to mock a man they thought was broke. The irony was so thick, so rich, he could almost taste it. He was no longer just the architect. He was the client, the developer, and the visionary, all in one. And the project he was about to build was a new life, on a foundation they could never have imagined. The groundbreaking was about to begin. The office of Mr. Harrison was a sanctuary of old-world integrity. It was on the third floor of a historic downtown building, a place that smelled of old books, lemon polish, and the quiet dignity of the law practiced as a profession, not just a business. The walls were lined with leather-bound volumes that looked as though they contained the wisdom of centuries, not just statutes in precedents. Mr. Harrison himself was a man from another era. He was in his late 60s, with a full head of silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, and a handshake that was both gentle and firm. He had been Liam's grandfather's lawyer, and he had handled the simple probate of the will that had passed the Texas land to Liam years ago. When Liam had called him, his voice a quiet beacon of calm in the storm of the divorce, Mr. Harrison had agreed to represent him without hesitation. "They've bled you dry, son," Mr. Harrison had said after reviewing the initial divorce settlement proposal. "This isn't a division of assets, it's a corporate raid." He had fought for what little Liam had managed to keep. Now Liam sat across the massive oak desk from him, the geological survey report lying between them like a sacred text. 34 million, Mr. Harrison said, his voice a low whistle. He had read the executive summary 3 times, as if to ensure his old eyes weren't deceiving him. He took off his spectacles and polished them with a soft cloth. "Liam, your grandfather, he was a character. He used to come in here, sit in that very chair you're in, and tell me about that land. He'd say, 'Arthur, people think I'm crazy for holding on to that dust bowl. But the Vances,' that's what he called Clara's family even then, 'they only see what glitters. They don't know a thing about what's valuable.'" Mr. Harrison put his glasses back on, his gaze sharp and focused. He would have loved this. He would have absolutely adored the poetry of it. "I haven't told anyone," Liam said. "I didn't know who to trust." "You were right to be cautious," Harrison nodded. "A sum like this doesn't just attract attention, it attracts predators, especially when there's a recent, acrimonious divorce in the picture." He tapped a long, thoughtful finger on the report. "The offer from West Texas Petroleum, it's solid, but it's their first offer. With reserves like this, we can do better." "Better?" Liam was taken aback. 34 million had already felt like an impossible number. "Liam," Harrison said, leaning forward, "you are no longer a man fighting for scraps from his own table. You are now the owner of one of the most valuable private energy prospects to come on the market this year. We are not going to just sell this land. We are going to leverage it. I'm a country lawyer, son. This kind of high-stakes energy negotiation is a specialized field. But I know a man in Houston, a barracuda, the kind of lawyer who makes oil barons weep. We're going to engage him." Liam felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in years. Power. Not the arrogant, brittle power that Julian and the Vances wielded, but a deep, solid sense of control over his own destiny. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "Let's do it." Over the next 2 months, Liam's life split into 2 parallel realities. In one, he was the same quiet, unassuming architect, living in his modest apartment, driving his sensible car. He continued to work at his firm, pouring his energy into the Arts Center project, finding solace in the clean lines and purposeful design. To the outside world, he was the man Clara had left behind, a cautionary tale of a failed marriage. In the other, secret reality, he was a key player in a high-stakes negotiation. There were encrypted emails, secure video conferences with the Houston barracuda, a man named Clayton Stowe, and late-night calls with Mr. Harrison. Liam, with his architect's mind for detail and structure, proved a quick study. He absorbed the complex terminology of mineral rights leases, royalty percentages, and signing bonuses. He learned the difference between a simple sale and a partnership agreement that could yield income for decades. Clayton Stowe, true to his reputation, initiated a quiet, brilliantly orchestrated bidding war. West Texas Petroleum's initial offer was just the starting point. Soon, 2 other energy giants, hearing whispers through the tight-knit Houston oil community, came to the table. The numbers began to climb. 34 million became 40, 40 became 45. They're treating it like the last lifeboat on the Titanic, Stowe reported in one call, his Texas drawl thick with satisfaction. Congratulations, Mr. Thorne. You're not just rich, you're becoming a dynasty. Liam remained grounded. He didn't let the escalating numbers change him. The money was a tool, a means to an end. The end was not a bigger house or a faster car. The end was freedom. The freedom to build, to create, to live a life of purpose without having to justify its monetary value to anyone. One afternoon, he was on site at the Arts Center, reviewing a blueprint with the foreman when his phone buzzed. It was a text from a friend, a woman who still moved in the same social circles as Clara. The text was a link to a Society magazine's online edition. The headline read, "Power couple Julian Croft and Clara Vance host dazzling penthouse party." Against his better judgment, Liam clicked the link. The article was accompanied by a gallery of glossy photos. There was Clara, radiant in a shimmering silver dress, her arm linked with Julian's. They were standing on the balcony of the condo, the city lights twinkling behind them like a field of captive stars. The condo he had designed. The article was fawning. It praised Julian's Midas touch in the financial world and Clara's impeccable taste and effortless grace. It quoted Julian extensively. "It's all about seeing the value others miss," Julian was quoted as saying, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Whether it's an undervalued stock or an opportunity to build a life with the right partner, you have to be decisive. You can't be sentimental." Liam scrolled through the photos. Clara and Julian toasting. Clara laughing with her parents. Richard and Eleanor looking smug and satisfied. Julian holding court, a circle of admirers hanging on his every word. They looked untouchable, triumphant. They were the king and queen of their glittering, superficial world. One photo in particular made him stop. It was a candid shot of Clara talking to a friend. For a moment, the camera had caught her with her social mask down. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, not happiness, but a kind of brittle tension, a desperate need to be seen as happy. He closed the article. He felt no anger, no jealousy. He felt a strange, detached pity. They were celebrating on the balcony of a skyscraper, feeling on top of the world, completely unaware that the ground beneath their entire reality was about to give way. They were toasting with champagne on the deck of a ship they thought was invincible, while he, the quiet man in the engine room, was preparing to reverse the turbines. The reversal of fortune was no longer an abstract hope. It was a meticulously planned, fully funded, and legally ironclad reality, just waiting for the right moment to be revealed. And Liam, the patient architect, knew that timing was everything. The invitation arrived not as a text or an email, but as a thick, cream-colored card delivered by a courier. The Vance family crest was embossed in gold at the top. It was an invitation, a summons really, to a small family dinner at Richard and Eleanor's mansion. To celebrate new beginnings and close old chapters, the elegant script read. Liam knew exactly what it was. It was the final act of the play, their final chance to display their magnanimity, to put him in his place one last time before casting him out of their orbit for good. For weeks, Clara had been leaving him voicemails, her tone shifting from impatient to vaguely threatening, about a final piece of paperwork, a minor tax form she'd called it, something about officially removing his name from an old utility account connected to the condo. It was trivial, legally meaningless, but she was obsessed with it. It was the last thread connecting him to her old life, and she wanted it snipped. Mr. Harrison had advised him to ignore her. "It's a power play, Liam. She wants to see you grovel. Don't give her the satisfaction." But now, holding the invitation, Liam saw an opportunity, not to grovel, but to bring the story to its proper conclusion. The setting was perfect. The entire cast would be there. Clara, the triumphant divorcee, Julian, the usurper, and Richard and Eleanor, the patron saints of snobbery. It was a stage built for drama. He called Mr. Harrison. "I'm going to the dinner. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Liam, is that wise? It's time, Arthur, Liam said, his voice steady. The final offer from Apex Energy came in this morning. The contracts are ready. The bidding war, expertly managed by Clayton Stowe, had reached a staggering conclusion. Apex Energy, desperate to get a foothold in the Wolfcamp Shale, had made an offer that blew the others away. It wasn't just a sale, it was a multifaceted deal involving a massive upfront signing bonus and a significant percentage of royalties on every barrel of oil extracted for the next 50 years. The initial payment alone was nearly double the first offer. The total potential value was almost incalculable. The contracts are on my desk, Liam continued. I plan to sign them, but before I do, I'm going to have dinner with my former family. I think it's important to close this chapter properly, on my own terms. Another pause. Then Mr. Harrison's voice, low and conspiratorial. What time is dinner, son? The Vance mansion was a monument to new money trying desperately to look like old money. It was a sprawling, faux Tuscan villa plopped down in the middle of a manicured suburb, complete with a grandiose fountain and a fleet of luxury cars gleaming in the driveway. As Liam pulled up in his modest sedan, he felt a strange sense of calm. He was no longer the intimidated son-in-law trying to make a good impression. He was a guest at a museum, observing the artifacts of a bygone era in his life. Eleanor greeted him at the door, her smile as thin and brittle as a wafer. Liam, how good of you to come. We weren't sure you would. Eleanor, he said, nodding politely, thank you for the invitation. He was led through the cavernous marble foyer to the back patio, where the others were gathered. The scene was exactly as he had pictured it. Richard was holding a glass of scotch, pontificating to Julian about the stock market. Julian was nodding along, looking bored and superior at the same time. And Clara stood by the shimmering blue pool, a vision in white linen, a queen surveying her domain. She turned as he approached, her eyes scanning him from head to toe, a quick, dismissive appraisal. Liam, you came. You invited me, he replied simply. Well, yes, we have that little piece of paper to sign, and I thought it would be more civilized to do it over a nice meal, she said. A final toast to the future, your future and ours. The separation was deliberate, emphatic. Dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. The conversation revolved entirely around topics designed to highlight Liam's perceived inadequacies. They discussed Julian's latest seven-figure commission, the Vance's upcoming trip to Monaco for the Grand Prix, and the soaring value of the downtown real estate market, a pointed reference to the condo. Liam remained quiet, a polite and attentive audience to their performance. He ate his food, complimented Eleanor on the catering, and answered their occasional, condescending questions about his little arts center with simple, direct statements. His calmness seemed to unsettle them. They were poking a bear they expected to roar, but the bear was simply sitting, watching, and waiting. So, Liam, Richard finally said, pushing his plate away as the servants cleared the table. Clara tells me you're still holding on to that patch of dirt your grandfather left you. Any coyotes build a condo on it yet? Julian snickered into his wineglass. It's quiet, Liam said. Peaceful. Peaceful doesn't pay the bills, Julian chimed in. You know, for a small consulting fee, I could probably help you package it into some kind of tax loss harvesting scheme. Might be the most value you'll ever get out of it. That's very generous of you, Julian, Liam said, his eyes meeting Julian's across the table. But I have it handled. Clara, sensing the evening's primary objective was at hand, clapped her hands together. Well, this has been lovely. Now for the final bit of business. She produced a single sheet of paper and the same sleek Mont Blanc pen Julian had offered him in the lawyer's office. If you could just sign here, Liam, it's just a formality. It allows the utility company to fully transfer the condo's accounts into my name. It will finally sever our last financial tie. She slid the paper and the pen across the table. All eyes were on him. This was the moment, the final genuflection they required, the signing of his official irrelevance. Liam looked at the paper. He looked at the pen. He looked at four expectant faces, gleaming with smug satisfaction in the soft glow of the patio lights. He did not pick up the pen. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a crisp, heavy envelope. He placed it on the table with a soft but definite thud. It sat between her meaningless form and his empty plate. "What's this?" Clara asked, her brow furrowing in annoyance. "I have some papers of my own," Liam said, his voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. A different kind of closing. A flicker of unease crossed Clara's face. Julian leaned forward, his bravado momentarily forgotten. Richard and Eleanor exchanged a nervous glance. The quiet before the storm had ended. The first drops of rain had begun to fall. "I'm not signing your paper, Clara," Liam said, his voice still quiet, yet it seemed to fill the entire patio, silencing the chirping of the crickets. "It's unnecessary. As of 4:30 p.m. this afternoon, any and all of my previous addresses or financial associations have become entirely irrelevant." Clara stared at him, bewildered. "What are you talking about? Liam, don't be difficult. Just sign the form." "He doesn't need to," a new voice said. All heads turned. Mr. Harrison had appeared from the side of the house, stepping into the circle of light. He was dressed in a simple, dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked calm, composed, and utterly in command. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard Vance boomed, rising slightly from his chair. "This is a private dinner." "Your daughter invited my client here to sign a document under false pretenses of a social engagement," Mr. Harrison said, his voice mild but with an underlying authority that made Richard sit back down. "I'm here to ensure his interests are protected. Please continue, Liam." Liam nodded at his lawyer, a silent thank you. He turned his attention back to the table, his gaze sweeping over each of them before landing on Clara. "For months, I've listened to you all talk about this land," he began, his voice gaining strength. "My patch of dirt, my lost cause. Julian, you offered to help me harvest it for a tax loss. Richard, you asked if the coyotes had built condos on it yet. And Clara, you told me to sell it for a few $1,000s, to not get too attached." He paused, letting the weight of their own words settle back upon them. "You see, you all have something in common. You see the world in a very specific way. You look at a thing and you see only its surface, its current market value, its potential for social status. You look at a person and you see their title, their bank balance, their connections." His gaze locked onto Clara's. "You looked at me and you saw a civic-minded architect, someone who wasn't ambitious enough, someone who was holding you back from the life you felt you deserved." "This is ridiculous," Julian scoffed, though a line of sweat had appeared on his brow. "What is the point of all this melodrama?" "The point," Liam said, his voice dropping, becoming dangerously calm, "is that you were all blind. You pride yourselves on seeing value where others don't, but you are the blindest people I have ever met." He gently tapped the envelope he had placed on the table. "You thought the condo was the prize, the liquid asset, the $1.2 million victory. So you took it. And you left me with the worthless land, the liability, the tax burden." He leaned forward, the architect revealing the hidden foundation of his masterpiece. "You were right about one thing, Julian. It is all about seeing the value others miss. While you were all busy celebrating your victory, I was doing a little survey. My grandfather always told me the earth holds its secrets deep. He was right." He slid the envelope across the table toward Clara. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. "Inside that envelope, you will find a copy of a contract I signed this afternoon with Apex Energy," Liam said, his voice clear and precise. "It's a mineral rights leasing agreement. It seems my worthless patch of dirt, my lost cause, happens to be sitting on top of one of the largest untapped oil reserves in the Wolfcamp Shale Formation. Silence. A profound, echoing silence that swallowed the night. The smugness on Julian's face dissolved, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. Richard's face, usually flushed with the self-satisfaction of a man of means, had gone a ghastly, pale white. He understood the words, Wolfcamp Shale. Eleanor looked back and forth between her husband and Liam, utterly lost. Clara's fingers fumbled with the clasp of the envelope. She pulled out the document. It was thick, dense with legal language. But she didn't need to read the clauses. Her eyes, and everyone else's, were drawn to the number on the first page. The number that was highlighted under the section titled, Initial Signing Bonus. What is this? She whispered, her voice barely audible. This has to be a joke, a typo. It's not a joke, Clara, Liam said softly. The quiet bomb had landed. The land you so generously let me keep, the land you called a worthless liability, concluded its auction today. That initial signing bonus, the first of many payments, is for $25 million. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. And that, of course, does not include the ongoing 20% royalty stake in all future extraction, which our analysts conservatively estimate to be worth an additional $60 to $70 million over the next decade, depending on market fluctuations. The sound that escaped Clara's throat was a strange, strangled gasp. The color drained from her face. The document slipped from her fingers and fluttered onto the stone patio. Julian lunged for it, his movements clumsy, frantic. He snatched it up, his eyes scanning the page, his finance bro brain trying to process a number that was so far beyond his own recent triumphs as to be comical. No, this is impossible. It's fraudulent. We had it assessed. You had the county tax assessor look at it, Mr. Harrison corrected him calmly. A surface valuation. My client, on the other hand, commissioned a full seismic and geological survey, a much more thorough approach. Richard Vance finally found his voice. It was a hoarse, shaky version of its usual boom. Half, he croaked, pointing a trembling finger at Liam. That's a marital asset. She gets half. Mr. Harrison gave a sad, slow shake of his head. I'm afraid not, Richard. You see, the asset in question at the time of the divorce was a plot of land valued at $5,000. Clara willingly, even eagerly, signed over her interest in that asset in exchange for other, more valuable properties. The discovery of the oil, and thus the realization of its true value, occurred after the divorce was finalized and the division of assets was legally settled. The land and everything beneath it belongs 100% to my client, Mr. Liam Thorne. He delivered the last line with a quiet finality that was more devastating than any shout. It was a legal checkmate, a fortress of their own arrogance, now turned into their prison. Clara began to cry, not the delicate, manipulative tears Liam had seen her use in the past, but harsh, ugly, gasping sobs of pure, unadulterated loss. The shimmering silver dress, the impeccable taste, the effortless grace, it had all been stripped away, leaving only the raw, grasping greed that had been there all along. You knew, she choked out, looking at Liam with eyes full of a new, horrifying respect. You knew this whole time. That day you were out at the land, when we saw you, you knew then. Liam thought for a moment. He remembered her pity, Julian's mockery, the dust from their tires. No, he said, and it was the honest truth. I didn't know then. I only had a hope, a hunch. You could have had half of that hope, Clara. You could have stood with me, but you chose to stand with them. You chose the sure thing. He gestured around at the opulent patio, the grand house. You chose the surface. I just kept digging. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of disintegration. Clara's sobs devolved into a desperate, furious tirade. We have to undo it. We can sue. There has to be a way, she shrieked, turning on Julian. You're the financial genius. You're the one who sees value. How did you not see this? Julian, his face ashen, had no answer. His entire persona, the foundation of his Midas touch, had been exposed as a fraud in a single sentence from Mr. Harrison. He had been so focused on his own reflection in the glittering surface of their lives that he had missed the continent of wealth lying just beneath the dust. He stared at Liam with a look of pure, uncomprehending hatred. He had been outplayed in a game he didn't even know he was playing. Richard Vance, the pragmatist, shifted tactics from legal threats to desperate appeals. He approached Liam, his demeanor completely transformed. The booming patriarch was gone, replaced by a pleading, wheedling man. Liam, son, he began, the word son tasting like ash in his mouth. Let's not be hasty. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, a family misunderstanding. We can fix this. We're family after all. You wouldn't want to see Clara, to see your family, suffer because of a simple mistake in paperwork. Liam looked at the man who had belittled him for years, who had never once shown him an ounce of genuine respect. We stopped being family the day you valued my net worth more than my character, Richard. Eleanor, who had been frozen in silent horror, finally spoke, her voice trembling. But the scandal, Richard. Think of our friends. When this gets out, we'll be a laughingstock. The Vances, who gave away a fortune for a condo. The social humiliation for her was the most painful blow of all. Liam stood up. The dinner was over. Mr. Harrison quietly packed his briefcase, his work done. This was never about the money, Liam said, his voice resonating with a clarity that cut through their chaos. It was about respect. The respect you demanded but never gave. The respect you thought you could buy with expensive things. He looked at Clara, her face streaked with tears and makeup. You had my love, my partnership, and my respect, and you traded it all for a better address and a man with a more impressive title. I truly hope it was worth it. He turned to leave. Wait, Clara cried, scrambling to her feet. She ran to him, grabbing his arm. Her touch was no longer proprietary, it was desperate. Liam, please, don't do this. We can get back together, we can fix this. I love you, I've always loved you. Liam looked down at her hand on his arm, then back into her eyes. He saw no love there. He saw only the frantic calculations of a gambler who had just lost everything on a single disastrous bet. He gently removed her hand from his sleeve. No, Clara, he said, his voice not unkind, but firm and final. You don't love me. You love what I have. And you just discovered, far too late, that you have no idea what that is. He and Mr. Harrison walked away from the patio, leaving the four of them standing amidst the ruins of their perfect evening, the signed contract a time bomb ticking away in the center of their shattered world. As he walked through the marble foyer and out the front door, Liam didn't look back. He was walking away from the noise, the drama, the suffocating weight of their expectations. He was walking toward the quiet, open space of his own life, a life he was about to build from the ground up, on a foundation of solid gold. The 6 months that followed were a study in contrasts. For Liam, they were a period of quiet, methodical construction. For the Vances and Julian Croft, they were a slow public demolition. Liam did not disappear on a yacht or buy a fleet of exotic cars. The first thing he did with the initial payment from Apex Energy was establish a charitable foundation in his grandfather's name, dedicated to funding arts and architectural education in underserved communities. His arts center, once a lovely little project, suddenly had its entire 10-year operational budget endowed. He resigned from his firm, not with a dramatic flourish, but with quiet gratitude. He then founded his own architectural studio, Thorne and Associates. He leased a floor in a new, environmentally conscious downtown building, a space filled with natural light, clean lines, and a palpable sense of creative energy. He hired the brightest young architects he could find, offering them not just salaries, but the chance to work on projects that mattered. Their first commission was a state-of-the-art public library for his hometown. He moved out of the small apartment, but not into a mansion. He bought a beautiful but understated penthouse loft in a converted warehouse district, a space with exposed brick, high ceilings, and a view of the city skyline that he, as an architect, could truly appreciate. He filled it not with expensive art, but with books, blueprints, and the comfortable furniture he'd always wanted. He was building a life, not just an image. The story of the divorce lottery, as the gossip columns called it, did leak, just as Eleanor had feared. But the narrative was not what she expected. Liam, through his quiet philanthropy and dignified silence, was portrayed not as a lucky fool, but as a kind of folk hero, a man of quiet integrity who had been wronged and then spectacularly vindicated. The Vances, Clara and Julian, on the other hand, became a public cautionary tale about greed and superficiality. Julian's fall was the swiftest. His reputation as a man with the Midas touch was shattered. The story made him look like an idiot, a man who couldn't spot a billion-dollar oil field under his ex-girlfriend's nose. His clients, wealthy and risk-averse, began to pull their money. Trust in his world was everything, and he had lost it. His boasting about seeing value became a running joke in the financial community. His relationship with Clara, built on the shifting sands of status and mutual ambition, began to crack under the strain. Clara's world shrank. The condo, once her symbol of victory, became a prison. The friends who had flocked to her parties now whispered behind her back. Every social event was an ordeal, filled with pitying looks and veiled questions. She and Julian began to argue, their fights echoing through the minimalist spaces of the apartment. He blamed her for her family's short-sightedness. She blamed him for his professional incompetence. The beautiful trophy husband was revealed to be just a man, and a deeply insecure one at that. One evening, Liam was working late in his new office when his assistant buzzed him. "Mr. Thorne, I'm sorry to bother you, but Clara Vance is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Liam paused. He looked around his office, at the blueprints for the new library spread across his desk, at the city lights twinkling outside his window. He felt a profound sense of peace. He was no longer afraid of her. "Send her in," he said. She looked different, thinner. The confident, radiant woman from the party was gone, replaced by someone who looked worn and exhausted. Her designer clothes seemed to hang off her, a costume she had forgotten how to wear. "Liam," she said, her voice small, "this place is beautiful." "Thank you, Clara. What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone polite but distant. "I left him," she said abruptly. "Julian, I left him. The condo is on the market. He lost a lot of his clients. He blamed me. He said our mistake had ruined his reputation." Liam said nothing. He just listened. "My parents, they're not speaking. My father is obsessed with trying to find a legal loophole to sue you. My mother just cries and talks about how we can never show our faces at the country club again." She gave a humorless laugh. "It's all fallen apart, Liam. All of it." She took a step closer. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I was a fool. I was blinded by all the wrong things, the things my parents taught me to value. But being with you, that was the only time I felt real. I see that now." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. This time they looked genuine, tears of regret. Is it too late? For us?" Liam looked at the woman standing before him. He didn't feel anger or triumph. He felt a deep, profound sadness for her. She was a product of her environment, a person who had been taught that love was a transaction and life was a competition. She hadn't just lost a fortune, she had lost the ability to know what was truly valuable long before she ever met him. "Yes, Clara," he said, his voice gentle but unwavering. It's too late for us. It was too late a long time ago. Not because of the money, but because of the choices we made. The person I was with you is gone. And the person you were, I don't think she ever really existed outside of what you thought other people wanted to see. He walked to his desk and pulled out a checkbook. He wrote a check and slid it across the desk to her. It was for a significant amount, enough to give her a fresh start, to be free from Julian and her parents. She looked at the check, then back at him, confused. "What is this?" "It's a gift," he said, "not for the woman who left me, but for the woman I once loved. The one who I hope can still find her way. Use it to build something for yourself, Clara. Not a life that looks good on the outside, but one that feels right on the inside. That's the only kind of architecture that lasts." She took the check, her hands shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. She turned and left his office without another word. Liam watched her go, then turned back to the window. He knew he would likely never see her again. He had closed the final chapter, not with revenge, but with grace. He had given her a chance at redemption, but it was a journey she would have to take on her own. The city glittered below him, a tapestry of light and shadow, of endless possibilities. He had his own building to do. 1 year later, Liam stood on the observation deck of the newly completed Community Arts Center. It was a beautiful building, full of light and life. Below, in the main gallery, a crowd had gathered for the dedication ceremony. He could see children from the local schools running across the plaza he had designed, their laughter echoing upwards. Mr. Harrison stood beside him, looking out at the same view. He had become a close friend and a board member of Liam's foundation. "Your grandfather would be proud, son," Mr. Harrison said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Not because of the money, but because of this." He gestured to the building, to the people, to the community it was creating. "You took what the earth gave you, and you used it to build something that will lift people up. That's real wealth." Liam smiled, a deep, genuine smile of contentment. He had learned the hardest and most valuable lesson of his life, that true worth is not something you own, but something you build. It's not measured by the size of your bank account, but by the integrity of your character. It's not about the assets you acquire, but the legacy you leave behind. He had been handed a fortune, but he had earned his peace. He had faced betrayal and humiliation, but he had refused to let it make him bitter. He had maintained his dignity, his integrity, and his quiet strength. In the end, they hadn't just left him the land, they had left him with himself, and he had turned out to be the most valuable asset of all. And as he looked out at the city, at the endless horizon, he knew this was not an ending, it was a foundation, and he was just getting started. So, what do you all think? What does true wealth mean to you? Is it financial freedom, or is it something more? I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the things people dismiss as worthless hold the most value, and that patience and integrity are their own reward. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, redemption, and the quiet triumphs of the human spirit. Thank you for being a part of this community. Until next time, keep building something beautiful.